Major funding for Marcia Adams Heartland Cooking is provided by Maple Leaf Farms, a symbol for ducklings and frozen entrees, chef quality you can count on. By Souder Woodworking, America's furniture craftsman. With more than 50 years' experience, Souder provides ready-to-assemble furniture for today's home and office. By Marilat Industries, America's cabinet maker, committed to quality in a variety of kitchen and bath cabinetry styles.
Hello and welcome to Heartland Cooking. Today I want to talk to you about Wisconsin and its foods, especially some of the favorite ones from that state, brats, cheese, and beer. Did you know that more beer is sold in Wisconsin than any other state? I don't know what conclusion can be drawn from this, except to recognize that these people know how to make a beer or beers that are irresistibly good. Since 1840, more than 300 breweries have opened and closed in Wisconsin. Now, there are only 3 major breweries left. But we're seeing a resurgence of breweries opening up all around this country, boutique breweries, but we'll talk about those a little later on. Nevertheless, our recipes today have an emphasis on beer, and they range from elegant to lazy picnic dishes. Let's get started. Our first recipe is Flemish beef and beer, and it's an ideal company dish. It holds up well in a casserole on the buffet and can be eaten with just a fork. You know, when you think about it, it's difficult to fiddle with a piece of meat that has to be cut with a knife at a stand-up buffet dinner. Anyway, you begin by sautéing 1/4 cup of vegetable oil and 1 large onion, thinly sliced, and a minced garlic clove together over medium heat until they're transparent. Transfer that mixture to a small bowl with a slotted spoon. Then prepare the meat, and that's 2 pounds of round steak. Cut it into bite-sized cubes. And then we want to dredge that in a mixture of 3 tablespoons of flour, a teaspoon of salt, and 1/4 of a teaspoon of ground pepper. And I want to show you what I mean by dredging. Now, some people would do this in a pie pan, but I think it's easier to do it in a sack. So you take that dry mixture and put it in a sack and sort of combine it by shaking, and then take your meat in sections, maybe 4 or 5 parts at a time, and put it in the sack and just sort of shake it up. The commercial name for this, of course, is shake and bake, as you know, but this is just our own. Now you do that to your 2 pounds of round steak and add up to 1/4 cup more oil to your skillet, and you brown the meat on all sides. Look at this. Yummy. You can see already it's beginning to brown and look very, very nice. Now, on the top of that, we're going to add the earlier sautéed onions. Put that right on top, because we're not even going to mix this in. Everything's going to be sort of in layers. Now then add the remaining ingredients, which we began with these onions, and then we're going to sprinkle on 2 parsley sprigs that are minced, and 1/2 teaspoon of nutmeg. Isn't that a nice seasoning and an interesting one? And 1/2 teaspoon of thyme, and then 1 bay leaf that's crumpled. Put that on top. And then over the top, we pour 1 bottle of beer, and this is any kind, and that's our cooking liquid. So you see that's going to be a really nice tenderizing liquid, which is very good for round steak because it's a firmer cut of beef. And then over all of this, we sprinkle 1 tablespoon of brown sugar. Now cover this and bake this from 1.5 to 3 hours at 325 degrees. Now, why I give you such a long span of cooking is because this depends on the dish that you use and the tenderness of the meat. And by all means, if you are using a glass dish, lower that heat to 300 degrees. You should start testing the meat with a fork 1 hour after you put it in the oven, because really I can't guarantee quite when it'll be done. Isn't this delicious? This is a Belgian dish, and sometimes it's called corbonade. You can make it early in the day and then put it in the oven for a couple of hours and forget about it. It's really convenient. Now, Sheboygan, Wisconsin claims to be the sausage capital of the world, and I don't think anyone quarrels with that. Their specialty is bratwurst, and that's a name that originally meant lean meat sausage. It's a first cousin to the hot dog. Many brats are a mixture of veal and pork and very tasty. The fresh ones, however, are better than the pre-cooked ones, so look for those in your meat market. We're going to grill the bratwurst today, which is a great way to prepare them. But you do have to start the night before. You place 8 bratwurst in a glass dish and pour 1.5 cups of beer, any kind, over them and refrigerate the brats overnight. It's important to use a glass dish for this step because the fermented beer will interact with the metal and give off a flavor. Now these brats have been marinated overnight and we have just begun to grill them. Aren't they mouth-wateringly delicious looking and just golden brown? Ideally, these are grilled about 8 inches above the charcoal. But if you're lucky enough to have one of these inside grills, follow the manufacturer's instructions. We've grilled these about 7 minutes on a side. Be sure to use tongs when you do this because you don't want to puncture these brats because the wonderful liquids will ooze out, and not only when do you lose flavor, but number 2, you're apt to start a little fire. Instead, you should always have a little squirt jar on hand, a squirt jar of water to put out any flames if you're working outside especially. Now we're going to make the sauce. Here in this saucepan, we've sauteed 1.5 tablespoons of vegetable oil and 2 large onions that are very coarsely chopped, and that coarse business is important. And cook them until they're wilted down and just beginning to get gold. Now we're going to add some nice spices to it. And we're going to begin, it's really sort of a sweet and sour sauce, 2 tablespoons of dark brown sugar, and 2 tablespoons of cider vinegar, a tablespoon of Worcestershire, a teaspoon of this beautiful red paprika, which is going to color up the sauce nicely, half a teaspoon of salt, and this bay leaf, which I've been using as a gesturing device, and then add the reserved beer that the brats were soaking in overnight. Now turn up the heat to high and let this cook about 5 minutes because you want the sauce to reduce. We have one completed here. Doesn't this look delicious? You can see how red it is from that paprika and very flavorful. Now baste the brats with the beer onion sauce just during the last few minutes of cooking. And get some of those onions on there too. And whoops, there went the bay leaf. Well, we'll just have a charred bay leaf, that's all. You know, beer is the most popular of all of the alcoholic drinks among the Americans, and half the money spent on alcoholic beverages in the U.S. is spent on beer. It's an old drink, nearly 8,000 years old, and enjoyed long before wine. Now, some people like to serve these in a bun, and sometimes they're served with sauerkraut on top. This is a hearty picnic dish, and I like to serve it with a sweet and hot mustard sauce that's made from scratch. That recipe's in the cookbook. I mentioned to you earlier that small breweries are making a comeback. These are fascinating places to visit, and many times they're attached to a restaurant. And one of these is located in Cleveland, Ohio, the Great Lakes Brewing Company, which the owner, Pat Conway, calls a brew pub, a brewery restaurant.
The brew pub is located in a recently restored old neighborhood on the west side of Cleveland in this handsome building. In the summer, you can sit outside in their enclosed beer garden. What is really interesting about this particular restaurant is that you can see the entire process of beer making from beginning to end, which includes the delivery of the grain and the hops.
Pat, I'm hearing a lot about mini breweries or microbreweries, and I know that these are small breweries that are springing up all over the United States. Now, what is it exactly? What's the proper term, and why is it happening?
Well, Marcia, the microbrewing movement probably started here in the United States about 10 years ago, and there was only a handful. Now there's a plethora of activity going on. I think it's a response to the American need for a beautiful handcrafted beer. Prior to this movement that's afoot now in the brewing industry, most Americans turned to Europe for beautiful handcrafted beer. Now they can find this being made by small breweries like ourselves, and I think there's been a change in the American palate, and there's people like myself and many others like myself who are responding to it.
And you make the beer here on the premises of your restaurant, and you call yourself a brewery pub?
Well, we're actually a brew pub, but we're part of the microbrewery movement. We're so successful in our enterprise here that we're actually starting to sell our beer in about 12 different stores here in the Cleveland area. Actually, the rationale behind our whole project and all microbrewery projects is freshness of product. And beer is a perishable, so the fresher you brew it, keg it, and consume it, the better it is.
Explain the process, if you can, briefly, how you make these delicious beers.
Well, Marcia, that process is called brewing. It starts here on the first floor next to the dining room, and it's taking the raw material, barley, cooking it long enough where you extract the hot sugary liquid from it. Then you take that liquid and then boil it and then infuse hops, which will add bitterness to the product, and that takes about 8 hours.
The hops then add the flavor.
Right, that is your bittering agent. And then the liquid drops to the lower level, and it's right there where we also have our bottling. We abut the bottling operation next to our dining room so our customers can see how we literally handcraft our product. And each label, incidentally, has a date saying, please drink by this date because there's no chemicals involved. We eschew the use of any of the 50 that you're allowed to use. Also, in this room that abuts the dining room are our fermentation and aging tanks, and it'll rest there for a week while it ferments, and then ages for 3 more weeks, which takes then a whole month for the beer to go through its maturation period. The reason we have a filtering process is because, as you can see by the beer that I've taken from the tank, that there's a cloudiness to the product,
yes.
and that's the suspended yeast that's still in the beer. And we thought that it would be visually more attractive to filter it. Secondly, the nose changes, and clearly the third part, and the most important, is that it actually tastes better. And as you can see by the filtered beer that we have here at the bottling table, as the two products are juxtaposed, that it's very, very different after the beer is filtered.
Very clear, nice bubbly head on it.
And very tasty, wouldn't you agree?
Yes, absolutely.
The restaurant menu is planned so it will pair well with the beers. The original bar is from the 1860 period and sports its own bullet hole from the time of Eliot Ness, who came from Chicago to bring order to Cleveland.
If you're ever in the Cleveland area, be sure to stop by the Brew Pub. And incidentally, it's just a block away from the Cleveland Market. You shouldn't miss that either. This next recipe is unmistakably Midwestern. It's cheddar cheese, sausage, and beer soup. It's from Quivy's Grove, an attractive restaurant that's housed in an 1855 stone mansion just outside of Madison, Wisconsin. This is really a great soup because you can do a lot of the steps ahead of time. The first thing you want to do is saute 12 ounces of bulk sausage and set it aside. Then grate or have ready 12 ounces of sharp cheddar cheese. Then, in a very large stock pot, simmer, uncovered, 2 quarts of water and a pound of smoked ham pieces and a small chopped onion and a half a teaspoon of pepper for 1 hour. Now, mind you, that's with the lid off. And then you want to take off the fat. You can do that by refrigerating the broth overnight and just lifting off the fat that will coagulate on top, or you can take the warm broth and put paper towels on top and soak it up that way. This has already been done for me, and I've put the stock in a measuring cup so you can see it better. Strain out the ham and set it aside because you're going to return this to the soup. Now you make a roux. And listen carefully, because this is what you're going to do. It's a little bit different. You melt 1 cup of margarine, and that's the correct amount. 1 cup of margarine in a stock pot, and then add or whisk in 1.5 cups of all-purpose flour. Now you want to cook and stir this for about 5 minutes over medium-low heat until the mixture bubbles up well, and you can hear it sizzling. Don't let it get brown, but do let this bubbling up happen, because you need that so the protein expands and will thicken the sauce. Now, slowly, we're going to add the reserved hot stock and whisk this in all the while. And it's thickening up right away. We have a good roux here. Roux, incidentally, is spelled R-O-U-X. And this broth is very rich and very good from the ham flavor. Ham and bacon have been traditionally used, as you know, for seasoning in the Midwest for many years because a little bit gives a big flavor. Now, this is all smooth, so we're now ready to add 2 cups of milk. Now continue cooking this over medium heat until it's thick and smooth. And that will take maybe 5 to 7 minutes, and keep whisking it. We have one here that's already done. And what we have really is a very good white sauce. And now we're going to finish this up by adding 3/4 cup of beer. Whisk that in. Again, it can be any kind, though I would tell you that I think a light beer, you wouldn't want to use a dark beer in this at all. And then we're going to add the 12 ounces of grated sharp cheese. And I think this is just probably a good Colby. And now whisk that in. And so now we have moved almost to a Welch rarebit when you think about it, which is awfully good on toast. We could stop at this point and have Welch rarebit, I do think. And you're going to let that melt. And that's going to take maybe 2 or 3 minutes. Wisconsin food has a lot of variety due to all the ethnic groups that live there. And certainly this soup is a reflection of all those people. For instance, the Germans who made the bratwurst, and the cheese and sausage makers who came over soon after the Germans came to these shores, because they knew this was a good country to live in. Incidentally, 35% of the cheese that's consumed in the U.S. is from Wisconsin. If you check that in your kitchen refrigerator right now, I bet you'd say made in Wisconsin was on every one of your cheeses. Now to this, we're going to add the reserved ham and the sauteed bulk sausage. This could be a spicy bulk sausage if you really like that kind of thing. And 1/4, I'm going to switch to a spoon here, I do think, and 1/4 cup of minced parsley. And then I'm going to add a splash of red pepper sauce. Now, Quivy's Grove didn't have this in their recipe, but I think it gives it a really nice lilt. Now, combine all of this. Oh, how pretty this is. See the cheese melting? It's a hearty soup. This would be a one-dish meal. Maybe you'd want to serve some cornbread with it and a very light green salad. A wonderful dish, a wonderful dish. There. Now, you want to serve this immediately, or keep it warm on low heat. If you have to reheat it, do it in a double boiler. Incidentally, I think this is a little bit thick, and if that happens to you, and it might, because we don't know how this flour is going to absorb from recipe to recipe, you might want to add a little milk to thin it down, because not everybody likes a thick soup like this. I happen to, but even that's a little thick for me. Now, this is a very savory soup, and now we're about ready to dish up, as we say. I wonder what the derivation of that. Well, that's probably obvious. Just put things in a dish. Okay, here we have it. I think that this would be better in a shallow soup lug like we have right here. This is a real stick-to-your-ribs dish, isn't it? There we are. Isn't that handsome and delicious looking? Now, as you can see, this is not a light soup, so serve it on a cold winter day, and we certainly have lots of those in the Midwest. As an ending to this show, it seems appropriate to fix a potato salad that would be an ideal dish to serve with brats and a bottle of beer. Now, this recipe has quite a few ingredients in it, I'll admit, but none of them take much preparation. I'm fudging a little bit, but do get your paper and pencil out, because the seasonings are what make this salad outstanding. And you want to begin with 7 large boiled potatoes, or 12 medium ones, cut in 3/4 inch cubes after, of course, they're peeled. And then while they're still warm, we're going to pour a vinaigrette over the top. And you make this by combining a 1/2 cup of vegetable oil, 1/4 cup cider vinegar, a 1/2 teaspoon of salt, and 1/4 teaspoon each of pepper and dry mustard. And then you shake this up. And you could, if you like, cheat and use an Italian dressing that's bought, but just don't tell me about it. Now pour this over the warm potatoes and toss it all together lightly. And these warm potatoes are going to absorb the marinade or the vinaigrette dressing. And that's one of the secrets of this potato salad having such a good flavor, because the flavor is going right into the center of those warm potatoes while we prepare the rest of the ingredients. Now I have those all laid out over here. And don't faint, and don't say, Marcia, I'm not going to do this. It's too many ingredients, because it's so simple. Most of these things are right out of your cupboard. Just a few. We begin with 1 cup of chopped onion. You could do that a couple days in advance if you're really in a hurry. And 2 cups of chopped celery, and 1/2 cup of salad pickles. Now, salad pickles are quite different than pickle relish. See that? They're chunks, and we can buy them here in our Midwestern stores. And it's just a wonderful product. And then 3 tablespoons of mustard, and that could be the ballpark mustard, and 3 tablespoons of granulated sugar, and a 1/2 teaspoon each of salt and pepper, and a 1/2 teaspoon each of dried basil and oregano, and a teaspoon each of celery salt and celery seed. Now, both of these celery products will give a lot of flavor to this potato salad. And then we're going to add this. Let me see, that was a half a cup, I think, of parsley. And I like it rather coarse because you want this to have a lot of color. And 8 slices of bacon that's been cooked and crumbled, and 3 hard-cooked eggs that have been chopped. I think we might begin mixing that all together, just like this. This is really a version of my mother's potato salad, and she was famous for it. And when we would go to carry-in dinners, people would whisper around and say, "Where's Esther's potato salad? Where's Esther's potato salad?" So you're getting a version of her potato salad. Now we add 2 cups of mayonnaise. Now see, this didn't take long, did it? Now, getting back to the topic of beer for a moment. At the turn of the century, the arrival of the German immigrants brought the idea of beer halls into our consciousness. And why not? They were pretty fun, and they really flourished. And then came Prohibition, 1920 to 1933, and that was really a disaster for the beer industry. Nonetheless, the people kept making beer at home, and they called it home brew. I don't have any memories of that, but I hear wild stories about it. Now we're going to pour this dressing mixture over the potatoes, which by this time have absorbed all of the vinaigrette. And now combine this very, very gently, because you don't want the potatoes to get mooshed up because you've been rough with them. So treat the vegetable with respect on this one. Doesn't this look delicious? I recall as I'm stirring here that one of the things we used to do when we would go to potluck dinners, like at church functions or home ec club meetings, so the food wouldn't run together. My mother was sort of strange about things, as I recall. We would take muffin pans and we would put our food in the muffin pans so it wouldn't all run together, like you'd have your potato salad in one muffin pan and your beans in one muffin pan and Jell-O in another muffin pan. But that was kind of a good idea, actually. Now, this is really like the potato salad that you remember eating at family reunions. That is, if you were lucky. Or maybe it's like that salad you wished you ate at family reunions. Let's go through what we did today. Our first recipe was Flemish beef and beer, a very delectable entree made with round steak and simmered in beer and spices. Remember this for your next buffet party. And then grilled bratwurst, brushed with a beer and onion sauce, a specialty of Sheboygan, Wisconsin, and are they proud of it? And then the very first-rate cheddar cheese, sausage, and beer soup, a hearty dish. And finally, this creamy, colorful potato salad, the secret being the vinaigrette that's poured over the warm potatoes, as well as all those seasonings I showed you. Because of the easy availability of beer, as well as the fact that most water was not safe to drink, containers for beer appear early in culinary history. A firm that was famous for its gorgeous steins was the Metlock pottery that operated out of a former German abbey. By 1841, this pottery was reproducing steins using an overglaze painting technique that combined both high and low temperatures, which allowed the use of many colors, which then could be reproduced over and over again. This Metlock stein, number 2682, is remarkable for its workmanship. The etched design of a young girl gathering grapes is really a splendid image. It was made in about 1860. Metlock stein 1090, and incidentally, serious Metlock collectors look for the number that is etched on the bottom, has a very pebble-like texture, much like needlepoint. The Metlock firm closed in 1921. This is a commemorative coronation mug to celebrate the crowning of King George VII, made in 1937. And this contemporary stein was made by Wedgwood to celebrate the wedding of Prince Charles and Diana. And these terracotta Wedgwood mugs are called ale jugs. And incidentally, pewter mugs like this from the colonial period are very rare because many pewter pieces were melted down to make bullets during our Revolutionary War. The drinking of beer in pubs is frequently pictured in early paintings as a beverage that's shared with friends. It seems appropriate to show you then a friendship quilt. This pattern is sunflower, and scores of hands stitched this one, some signing their names in the center of the flower. Look at this one. It says, Aunt Myrtle's apron. Until next time, essa gut, eat good.
Major funding for Marcia Adams Heartland Cooking is provided by Maple Leaf Farms, a symbol for ducklings and frozen entrees. Chef quality you can count on. By Souter Woodworking, producers of ready-to-assemble furniture for the home and office. America's furniture craftsmen with more than a half-century of experience. By Marilat Industries, America's cabinet maker, committed to quality in a variety of kitchen and bath cabinetry styles.